Welcome to the announcement of this year's Sunday Times University of Warwick Young Writer of the Year Award. My name's Andrew Holgate. I'm the literary editor of the Sunday Times, and it's good to have you join us for this year's winners announcement. In a moment, we're going to ask our four wonderful judges, Tessa Hadley, Kit Duvall, Human Barakat and Sebastian Folks, to talk a little bit about our outstanding writers who have made it onto this year's shortlist. Jay Bernard for their book of poetry Surge, Catherine Cho for her memoir Inferno, Nisha Dolan for her debut novel Exciting Times, Sean Hewitt for his book of poetry Tongues of Fire, and Marina Kemp for her debut novel Nightingale. But before we do that, just a few words about the award itself. It's for British and Irish writers, 35 years or under, writing in any genre. And it was founded in 1991, and since that time has been won by what's really a who's who of modern literature. From Helen Simpson to Zadie Smith, Robert Macfarlane, Sarah Waters, Carol Phillips, Simon Armitage, William Dalrymple, and on, to its most recent winners who have included Sally Rooney, Max Porter, and last year, Raymond Antrobus. Before we announce the winner, here are our judges to talk briefly about the shortlist.
I'm very delighted with our 5 shortlisted books, all of them so full of young energy. Jay Bernard's astonishing poems built around the New Cross fire in 1981, in which 14 black teenagers died, and you might think that was a recipe for a kind of polemic and outrage, but the poems subtly lift the lid on the headline story and find the music and the pleasure and the secret heart of what happened hidden inside.
It's an angry book, it's a political book, it looks at the fallout, political, social, cultural from these events. But what is really remarkable about it is the way that the author has retained such a pure control over the way they tell the story and have transformed this story into real poetry using a variety of different meters and rhythms and forms, some lyrical, some like songs, some like ballads. So as a meeting of the public and the private, and in a way of looking at terrible things with an icy control, this is a formidably impressive book.
The collection incorporates fragments of documentary evidence in relation to the fire, including newspaper clippings and interviews with survivors. The poems are linguistically rich, blending elements of patois and dancehall rhythm with colder, more functional language redolent of an inventory. And yet, despite this collage, cut and paste structure, the Surge doesn't feel at all disjointed. It reads and feels like a unified whole. The collection pans seamlessly from micro-level to macro-level narratives, from the lives of individuals to the broad sweep of history. These poems evoke a lost past while nodding pointedly to the struggles of the present.
Powerful, beautiful collection of poetry, personal, political, unapologetic, written in the beautiful cadence of patois and black music. Absolutely loved it.
Inferno by Catherine Cho. This is a memoir, and so different from the other books on the shortlist, and it's a memoir of a terrifying experience of postpartum psychosis. In other words, what some people call postnatal depression, but it makes it quite clear that it's much worse, this experience, than something that often called the baby blues. This is a genuine psychosis in which the young woman, the author indeed, Catherine Cho, loses a connection with reality. It's frightening, and the experience is described very, very calmly in a quite detached way, very impressively so. And the good thing, I suppose, is that it has a relatively happy ending insofar as she emerges from this experience, but is able to share it in what I think is quite an important way.
completely original topic as far as I know. One writer's account of a brutal stay in a mental institution following postpartum psychosis. I loved the way she wrote about it, very honest, very original, and just a complete page turner.
I think for me the most exciting sections are those in which she makes such intelligent connection between her experience in the present and her own past as a girl of Korean heritage growing up in America, negotiating the fracture lines between two cultures.
Exciting Times by Nisha Dolan is a funny and intelligent coming-of-age story about a young left-wing Irish woman who teaches English in Hong Kong. She has two big romances, first with an English banker called Julian, then with a very wealthy boarding school educated young woman called Edith. First and foremost, it's a comic novel. The humour is dry and deadpan and mostly at the expense of the English upper middle classes. But it's also about intimacy and attachment and about the difficulty of reconciling your personal relationships with your political idealism as you make your way in the world in your early 20s. This is an immensely readable novel. The prose is lively and energetic, and there is never a dull moment.
So witty, so funny, so fresh. Just an exciting book about identity, relationships, finding your way in a contemporary world. Really funny. Just, pages where I laughed out loud. A great read.
Nisha Dolan's novel set in Hong Kong is probably the funniest of our 5 books. So witty, so sharp, it cuts itself, skewering the pretensions of expats, bankers. Its strange, haunting story at the middle of it, though, is more uneasy than I'm making that sound. It's such a cleverly balanced book tonally.
It's a very funny book, and she's been compared to other young Irish writers, probably not correctly in my view. What's so good about this is the way that the author has so much enjoyed writing the book, and that made us think that as well as admiring this book, we felt that she would also have a good career in the future.
Tongues of Fire by Sean Hewitt is a highly assured collection of poems about nature and grief. There's something unabashedly earnest and almost nerdy about some of these poems. We have poems here about barn owls, about wild garlic, about fungus. They make you feel like you're a kid again, exploring the woods, that feeling of freedom and the sense of wonder. The register here alternates between meditative introspection and an impassioned and at times almost epiphanic lyricism. This is a very multi-layered work. There's a lot going on here. We have riffs on 12th century Irish epic poetry, theological references, candid accounts of early sexual experience. But for all this complexity, the language is disarmingly simple. And for all the heaviness of its themes, this is an immensely uplifting collection.
This is a very accomplished book. The poems are written in a way that you would think is quite traditional, I suppose. The language, the diction is lyrical. He's obviously read a great number of Irish and English poets. Many of them are celebrating the natural world, but they also go quite deeply into his own feelings, sexuality, the feelings about his family, his father in particular. And I think of the books on the shortlist, you might say this one is the least promising, this one is the most achieved. He's further on down the line than some of the other writers. Very admirable book.
Very exquisite capturing of the natural world, its wetness and softness and colour and smell sort of exploding on the palate and meshing with his very exquisite sensibility, very fine poet of nature and of the self in nature.
Such beautiful craft work on display in this collection, beautiful use of language and some just really special moments in this collection, which I thought was really original and a different way of using language.
Nightingale by Marina Kemp, a novel set in France, a novel about an old man being looked after by a young woman who comes from Paris. It's a little bit mysterious, it's about families, but it's also about generations. And it uses a lot of the novelist's craft to get into the minds and lives of other people in what these days would be considered quite a traditional way. But it's done with a lot of assurance in a way that makes you think this writer could go on to have a really good career as a novelist.
The story is beautifully told. Kemp's prose is taut and unobtrusively elegant. Her portrayal of small-town life with all its gossip and backbiting is both convincing and highly entertaining. The dialogue in particular is very strong. This is a skillfully crafted and emotionally intelligent novel. Its central themes are especially timely given everything that's going on in the world right now. And this is a book that makes us think about the importance and value of care work and about the many forms that love and compassion can take.
Marina Kemp's novel Nightingale is just the kind of novel I love, with its delicate, full notation of a particular place and time. In this case, it's rural France, where a young woman gets away from Paris and nurses a grumpy and happy dying old man in a small town in the provinces, and covers things about him and herself and his family. And you can just smell and taste and feel that place and that person in that place and all the adventures that unfold for her there.
Fabulous, old-fashioned in the best sense of the word, storytelling from a really exciting, unique voice, a really ambitious piece of work that I loved. It was clever and just beautifully rendered.
It was a difficult choice between 5 very strong contenders, but we did eventually come to a decision, and it was a unanimous one for a book that we all agreed was remarkable for its passionate engagement, for its variety of voices and variety of approaches to its subject, and also for its sheer humanity. And that winner is J. Bernard's Surge. So, Jay, many congratulations on winning this year's Sunday Times University of Warwick Young Writers Award for your collection, Surge. Many congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate it. Very welcome news at the end of a interesting year. And
you join a pretty distinguished list of previous winners. I don't know if you're aware of that list at all.
Yeah, I looked at the list many times, and it's a really intimidating roster of people who've gone before. So, yeah.
Now, I'm really sorry, this year being what it is, we're not able to properly celebrate your win in the way that we'd like to. It was a book that the judges absolutely loved. It was a unanimous decision, so congratulations for that. I thought what it might be nice to do is just to get you to read out one of the poems from the book, just to give people a flavour of what's inside, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks again to all the judges. This is a poem called Hiss, which is up on the Grant website, actually. Hiss. Going in when the firefighters left was like standing on a black beach with the sea suspended in the walls, soot suds like a conglomerate of flies. You kick the weeds and try to piece it back. Fractured shell, a bone, bloated antennae, flesh, thigh, spindle, gangrenous pet fish. An eye or a tiny glaring stone, a seal's tongue or a sour sinew yoking front and hind fin, vertebrae or fetters, bedsheet or slave skin. The black is coming in from the cold, rolling up the beach walls looking for light. It will enter you if you stand there and spend the rest of its time inside you, asking what it was, what it was, what it was, in a vivid hiss, heard only by your bones.
So, Che, the book has been the subject matter. The main subject matter of the book is the 1981 New Cross fire, in which 13 people, black people, were killed or died. And I just wonder, it's been how did you come across this? I don't know if you knew much about the fire before you began writing about it.
No, I didn't know a huge amount. I watched one short film, Bloodiger Run by Menelik Shabazz, which, you know, is a really short film that kind of examines the fire and kind of talks about the protests that happened afterwards. But I was about 17 or maybe 18 when I watched that, and I don't think I really grasped the concept. I don't think I really understood what it was talking about and what had happened and why it was an important little piece of history. And it was only really later on when I was commissioned by the Speaking Volumes to write for the 50th anniversary of the George Patmore Institute that I really learned the full ramifications of the fire and what exactly had happened. So it was a learning process as much for me, actually.
And you've used that as the basis of the book, but you've thrown it forward as well, haven't you, to include things such as the Grenfell fire as well.
Yeah, I think the book is really about what it means to be looking at the New Cross fire now, to be reflecting on it, to be kind of understanding the ripples of history that have come since. I was very intentional about looking at this from the perspective of someone who's engaging with an archive. Like this is the second poem in the book, is really all about going into the archive and engaging with the history. And then what follows is kind of an imaginative reanimation. But I'm not trying to tell history. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to do something a little bit different. So there's a lot in there about kind of present day London. There's sexuality in there, there's gender who comes into it, and lots of other kind of interactions, stuff about sort of language and the way English has changed as well. It wasn't supposed to be a book of a kind of historical retelling of the fire.
One of the things that's really striking about the book as well is the real variety of forms poetic forms you used, which is really impressed the judges. I don't know if that was deliberate or it was just you were looking for different approaches in ways of looking at the subject.
Yeah, I think I was trying to kind of write from what was in front of me. And so that in some ways informed how I kind of went about some of the poems. Like some of them are songs, which came from the fact that I was thinking about and listening to dub poets at the time. And then some of them are kind of like more kind of like, formal, you might say. And that, I was trying to be responsive. And I was always told as a when I was kind of starting out with my first pamphlet that you must try to show a range, try to encompass as much as you can, really.
Now you're the third poet. Since we relaunched the prize 6 years ago, you're actually the third poet, I realise, to win the award. And I know this has taken you've been sort of writing this book for about 4 years. What are your immediate plans now, looking ahead?
I don't have any concrete plans as such. I'm just going to do more writing.
Poetry? Or might you one day move away from poetry and explore other avenues?
Well, I think the thing about Surge is that it already has been other things. I performed it. It was a show at the Albany Before that, it was a scratch show at the Roundhouse. I made a film that was based off, the same sort of pool of research. The poems have really travelled, actually. They've been in gallery spaces. So I would never write off any new form or new area, but I don't think I can pin down exactly where the writing is going to go next.
And how important to you is to your poetry is the performing of it? How much a part of the writing of it is the performing of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of I read a lot, and so there's always a kind of consideration of how something might sound. But I can't say that it was premeditated like that. Like, I don't think I sort of sat down and thought to myself, you know what, I really want to write a poem that can be, a book that can be performed necessarily. I think the book came out of this collection of poems that I put together, and then the performance came out of the fact that I put them together, and then it changed over time. It was almost like a kind of a back and forth, really, like one informed the other. And as I read it more, as I made I made 2 short films around it, as I wrote sort of short essay pieces around it. I don't think performance is the only thing, you see. I think it's also about how poems can take on another life, and also how the subject matter could take on another life. Because I was really more concerned about how I could talk about the New Cross fire and how it had become a really important area for me. That more than anything else, I think, informed the final book.
Okay, Jay. Well, again, I'm sorry we can't celebrate with you in person for your winning this year's award. But just to reiterate what a wonderful book it is, and how delighted we are that you've won this year's Sunday Times University of Warwick Young Writer of the Year award. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.